Hi everyone, my name is Mariam and I am basically ambassador for Pi and AI, which is owned by deeplearning.ai. And it's an event related to the topic of the event is basically a self-supervised learning for object detection. And the speaker is Danish Nazir, who is research assistant at German Research Center for artificial intelligence. So he's basically very talented person in regarding computer vision. I did a research paper with him in past years, so I know him very well about the research area he is working. So the topic is very interesting, and I'm really looking forward to attend this event as well. So before starting the event, I just wanted to announce a few things regarding the post-event stuff. So basically, the one thing is really important. After event, we will send you the survey for the participants. So when you fill out the survey, the participants who fill out the survey, they will have an email with which will be the Coursera discount code, who can be applied on the deep learning specialization. Different courses of deep learning specializations are offered on Coursera, so you can use that code for your discount purposes. And the other thing is really important is we will provide every participant a digital version of certificate for this event. So after that, the event will be finished. I will give you the I will email you the digital version of the certificate for the participation. So let's hope for the best, and definitely you will learn in this event. So I am giving the access to the speaker. So welcome, Danish. Let's start the event.
Thank you, Miriam, for your kind introduction. So, our today's topic is self-supervised methods for object detection. And so, let's start with my introduction. So, I'm currently doing masters in computer science with specializations in intelligent systems and scientific computing from Technical University of Kaiserslautern, Germany. And I'm also, along with that, working as a research assistant at German Research Center for Artificial Intelligence, which is located at Kaiserslautern. And along with that, in my past, I have worked as a chief technology officer at Ensign in Pakistan. So my Ensign is basically a startup which works on machine learning and IoT, and it provides surveillance. And along with that, I also wanted to highlight that my current research area is self-supervised learning for 3D point cloud representations. So we are currently applying the self-supervised learning to 3D point, and we want to extend the idea to 3D point classification. And so this is our ongoing project. And I've also included my email and LinkedIn in case anybody wants to connect with me or want to ask something about my research or about the topic. So let's start with the overview. So I would like to first go through what is supervised learning, pure mathematical definition. And after that, I will start with the self-supervised learning, that what is self-supervised learning basically, and why do we need it, and what are the jargons related to self-supervised, because it contains some terms which are not really common. And after that, I would like to introduce some workflows for object detection and the overall learning process, which is being used in self-supervised techniques. And adding to that, I would like to introduce some state-of-the-art methods which are currently a very hot topic, especially SimCLR, which is developed by Google Brain Team. And we will see that how it works and what is the accuracy with compared to the supervised learning methods. And at the end, I will provide some discussion about self-supervised learning. So supervised learning, as you all know, that we have some data set where X represents some data points. It could be images, where and Y represents the label. And our goal is to learn a mapping function which maps the input points to the output points such that we are able to predict very accurately on unseen data, which could be test data as well. And the workflow of supervised learning is very traditional. So you have some images and then you hire a person or do it yourself. You annotate the images. So for example, in this case, you could see that their images contains cats and dogs, I suppose. So you would simply annotate them. So you will tell where is the cat. So you will create a box manually and you will assign the labels that, for example, this is a cat, this is a dog, and so on for all of the classes in the data set. And after that you pass these data set through some convnet. So by convnet here I mean convolutional nets. So convolutional nets are very famous in images. So they tend to learn some filters which can describe the training data in a much more better way than manually learning those filters. So after that, when we have trained our connet, we will get some representations. By representations, I here mean by embedding. So every image will have some embedding. For example, in the last layer of connet we usually have some softmax applied, or before that fully connected layers. So fully connected layer will contain the representation of the input image that we will pass through connet. And at the end we could this is an optional step, you could perform transfer learning as well. If the we will discuss this in detail in the next upcoming slides, but the idea is to use the existing knowledge from the network. For example, the famous image nets. So in the image net we have million of images which are trained on cats, dogs, and many other classes. So now, for example, if you have your own data set, for example, you happen to have a dog and you want to some detect it. So you will take the images of that dog, and and it's possible that the images of that dog is not already present in the ImageNet dataset. So we can so in order to use the information from the ImageNet, you could simply train your own data on the ImageNet network. So this is kind of rough idea of transfer learning. And the supervised learning examples include visual image recognition, just like we are doing here. For example, we will recognize that the given image is of a cat, dog, or whatever. We can also use for image captioning as well. So the idea of image captioning is, for example, there is a person throwing a ball. So you would give the that image to the network, and the network will tell you that what's happening in the image. For example, it will give you an output like the person is throwing a ball. This is kind of rough idea. It also requires some labels. So supervised learning, it comes under the umbrella of supervised learning. So that was about supervised learning. Now let's see what we have in self-supervised learning. So I would like to give you a rough idea about it first. So we have a data set, and the scenario is that we don't have any labels, right? Because sometimes it's very expensive to generate labels of the data. So we want to generate the labels from data by exposing the relationship between the data itself. So for example, if we have some data and for example in the medical kind of field, so then you would simply it's possible that you will not have some labels of that, right? So instead of you manually annotating it, you could use self-supervised learning techniques to automatically generate labels, and we will see in the upcoming slides that how it's being done. So I don't know about you people, but I follow Jan LeCun very much. Let me give you some background of him. So he was the first person to introduce deep neural nets, and he's kind of the godfather of deep learning. And the self-supervised learning is also his idea. And the thought process of this technique is that humans usually learn in self-supervised mode, right? They don't learn in supervised learning mode or reinforcement learning modes or any other semi-supervised learning modes. But there has been some biological studies, to be precise, neuroscience studies, which shows that humans usually learn in self-supervised mode. So that's why it's kind of a next big thing in especially image recognition. And you could think that it for example, if you want to train something, you could simply scrap it from the Google, you would get billion of images. So think that now you don't even have to annotate them. So think of the possibilities you could do with that data, right? And the traditional examples are object detection, recognition, face recognition. It's basically face recognition was one of the first areas on which self-supervised learning was applied, and it's very famous in NLP as well. By NLP, I mean natural language processing. So yeah, so it's kind of very exciting field nowadays. It's only been like 9 to 10 months since this self-supervised learning has been gaining attraction all over the world. So as I have already explained, in order to grasp a new concept, we need to understand that why do we need it. So why do we need self-supervised learning? So as I have already explained that it's very difficult and expensive sometimes to get annotated data set. By expensive, I could mean that you will need to hire some manual data annotator person whose only job is to annotate the data itself. Along with that, you could also, by expensive, you could also mean take the intuition of time, because time is very important in research. So yeah, so now I think that you will not need any you by using self-supervised learning, you can even work without labeling the data itself. Also, the one of the most important and core idea is that we tend to learn generic feature representation learning. So by this statement, I mean that usually it happens in supervised learning that the classifiers get fixated on local feature representations, right? So, by introducing the idea of self-supervised learning, we are forcing the classifier to learn some generic representation learnings of the unlabeled data. And we will do this using some pretext task. So I will explain what pretext task is in the next slide. And also the other use cases, for example, in the giants, you could see tech giants, for example, Facebook. You would have to upload there are 1 billion images uploaded per day, which is like a lot if you want to manually annotate them. So in fact you cannot. So there comes the application of self-supervised learning, and same goes for YouTube and in Twitter as well. So 6,000 tweets after every second. So you can't simply manually annotate their tweets, for example, for sentiment analysis, that this is the positive sentiment, this is a negative, and stuff like that. Also, the main motivation which I think behind the self-supervised learning is the failed results of reinforcement learning in case of transfer learning. So let me give you some small background of reinforcement learning. So the idea is that there is some agent and there is some environment. For example, a room is your environment, and the agent is for example, a robot, and the idea is to clean that room. So the agent will have to find some paths in order to clean it in the best possible way, because you don't want your robot to work 24 hours just to clean some stuff. So that's why you need an optimal path. So this is a kind of rough idea for reinforcement learning. Now, what do I mean by transfer learning in this context is reinforcement learning is very bad in transfer learning. So, for example, the cleaning robot, this cannot be transferred into some cleaning roads, for example, because the environment is different. You need a different optimization techniques. So that's why reinforcement learning is very bad in transfer learning. So yeah, so that's why self-supervised learning comes into play, because it is very um, helpful in case of transfer learning as well, because we can use transfer learning easily on self-supervised learning, and hence we can use one data set into different domains as well. So this is kind of a good thing of self-supervised learning as well, and a big motivation to work in this field. So as I mentioned in the previous slide, the pretext task. So I will. This is pretext tasks and downstream tasks. So this is kind of new in this field. So I would like to explain now that what I precisely mean by these tasks. So the pretext task is basically we want to learn some feature represent. Basically, our goal is to learn some feature representation which are semantically and structurally meaningful, and pretext tasks usually help in order to learn such representations. So for example, here, so let's assume that we don't have any label for this data set, that what is it. So the idea is to, for example, the 0 degree, 0 degree, 180 degree, 90 degree, 270 degree, these are all the image labels, right? So we will these are the angles that we can rotate an images, because if you rotate 360 you would get the same image. So that's why I don't think we don't usually take 360 here. So the idea is very simple. So we randomly rotate such images to an angle where 0, 90, 180, 270, and then we save into a separate file that we have rotated. We remember that we rotated 0 degree this image, 90 degree this image, and then 180 degree, and then 270, right? So we trained our network using this data and the labels, right, which we have generated by ourselves. It wasn't provided pre-hand. Just like in supervised learning you would need some labels, but here we have generated ourselves by using some pretext tasks. So after that, what you will do is you will train a network which will only predict that how much this image is rotated. So you will give the images, and the network will output for an image that this is 90 degree, this is 180 degree, and this is 270 degree. Now you would be wondering that how does this help in downstream tasks, for example, classification and stuff. So if you look closely into this, so the idea is to make sure that the network knows that the trees grow from downwards to upwards, and they do not grow from sky to earth, right? So we want to kind of enforce the network to think like humans, just like we have some kind of understanding of the environment, that for example trees grow from earth to sky, and airplanes fly, and this is kind of semantic understanding of the environment. But our networks usually does not have this kind of intuitional understanding. So we kind of want to enforce our networks to understand these. So this is one of the pretext tasks which is very common. And the other task which is also very intuitional. So the idea is, for example, you have an image of the cat, right? So you don't know whether this is an image of the cat or a dog. We don't care about that as of now. So we will select usually we select the center of the image as the patch, and then we select the second patch randomly, right? So it could be anywhere in the neighbors. At is it's also been shown in 8 possible locations. So the idea is to, for example, first put the center patch through the CNN, and then put the second patch through the. We will use two CNN in this case because we have two images. One is the center, and the other is the a random patch of the neighbor of the center patch. So we will pass through both of these images through CNN, and then we will try to classify the position of the random patch. So, you will be thinking that why do we kind of need to do this? Why do we need to learn this? So the experiments have been proven that it kind of helps in learning representation in the feature space, and which have like similar, for example, this patch have like, for example, one eye, right? One eye and one and a nose and half of next eye. So if I take another patch which contains the second eye, so it will kind of semantically near that. For example, the center patch already contains an eye, so this will be consider for example, a good neighbor of it, of the center patch. So we want to teach network this kind of representations, that for example, these two representations are semantically kind of same. So we should the network should learn this, that this is kind of a neighbor in feature space. So in feature space, both of these will be close. However, if you take the image patch of the ear, it's kind of not semantically closer to the eye. So, and it will be far in the feature space. The other very interesting idea is that uh, usually in childhood we used to have some jigsaw puzzles, right? So we would solve them, and it will help us understand the final shape of the object. For example, if you are solving the jigsaw puzzle for an animal or something like this, so for the final image of the jigsaw puzzle would contain all of the parts.
Hi, Danish. Your audio is not properly, so kindly fix.
Yeah, yeah, I think I've back. Sorry for that. So, as I was explaining before, so the idea is to solve a jigsaw and to train the network in order to solve some puzzle. And by solving that puzzle, we would kind of understand that how this object is, for example, how this that what parts are important for this object. For example, in this example, you could see that the legs come before the, you could say, for example, legs are at the lower part of the body and the head is the upper part of the body. So the network will learn this, and it will help the network to identify the objects better. And this is also being experimentally proven that it helps very much in order, if we use jigsaw puzzle task and other tasks such as the relative position of the patches. So the network will learn these kind of features. And the other interesting task for the network is to, for example, we would give some grayscale images of our environment. For example, you could give the image of any animal, or for example zebras, because they have a very good and unique structure. They have lines. So you would give some grayscale images. By grayscale images, I mean that the image has only one channel, which is gray, and it does not have any green or red or other channels, right? So the idea is to, for example, predict the color for each pixel, right? And you would wonder that why we would want to do that. How would that help in doing some in increasing the accuracy of the object detection? So the idea is that, for example, the network will learn the color of the objects. So, for example, in this case, the network will learn that the head is kind of, I think I'm very bad in fish naming, so I guess this is goldfish. So perhaps not. I don't know. So for example, the head is yellow and the trunk is black, and then the tail is again yellow. So the network will learn these kind of things by predicting the color of a grayscale images. So, and also the one of the best example to understand is that if you give some images of our atmosphere, the network will learn that the trees are green and sky is blue. So this will help you in downstream tasks. Yeah. So this is basically a rough idea. So enough of pretext tasks. So we would now turn towards the downstream tasks. So the idea is basically the rough idea is to use the learning weights from the pretext text tasks and apply those weights to downstream tasks. So usually in the downstream tasks are computer vision applications, for example, object detection, segmentation, yeah, and you could use some NLP as well. It's very open. You could use any area which you like and evaluate the quality of the features. But in this case, as the session is dedicated to object detection, so I would mainly focus on the workflows related to object detection. So and in this task you would get the final accuracy. So by that you would then calculate or evaluate the quality of the features which has been learned through self-supervised learning. Other interesting idea is to use contrastive learning as well. So this is also an indirect branch of self-supervised learning. So the idea is very simple. So for example, if you can see the images here, you would see that there is cat, then there is parrot, and then there is giraffe and aeroplane as well. So the idea is to simply group the common elements together and such that the distance between the other classes is maximal maximized. So for example, here you could see that the if you apply contrastive loss on this data set, so what you should get is that the images of airplane is far apart than the other classes, but it's very near inside. For example, these two aeroplanes are displayed as close. So this means that these images are semantically and structurally equivalent, or I mean that they belong to same class. So using this technique, you could also generate pseudo labels. And yeah, this will not, of course, tell you that this first cluster is of aeroplane, but you could use, for example, 0 for this class, 1 for parrot, and 2 for cats, 3 for giraffes. So these are kind of pseudo labels that otherwise you would have to obtain via manual annotations. So this is also a very cool idea. So now I think we should uh, go through the workflow. So the idea is, as I've explained before, so the idea is to learn some features using some pretext tasks. It could be anything. Usually it's usually uh, usually we use only rotation tasks, but you can only use any pretext task or develop new tasks, new pretext tasks. You can do that by using some by reading some kind of neuroscience and think of a task that which will help. For example, you could discover some new task which humans do, and then you could implement it and see how it goes. And if you are lucky, you would be able to uh, increase the accuracy of the state of the art systems. So for example, in this workflow you could see that there are some images which we are passing through ConNet, and through ConNet, after passing through ConNet, we will get some representations of each image, and then we can apply the pretext task. So the downstream, after the pretext learning has been finished, we can then transfer the knowledge of the pretext task and evaluate that how good is that pretext task. So, and we can then tune it to any downstream task. For example, it could be anything: segmentation, detection, uh, yeah. So the usually in computer vision, these two are very famous. So mainly people only, uses that to evaluate the quality of the learned features. And yeah, so we can only by fine tune, I mean applying transfer learning on only some layers and using the weights from the pretext task. So now we would like to see that how to apply this in kind of object detection. So consider that we have an image of a cat. Now we have a self-supervised model, as I have already explained, is trained on rotation prediction. That, for example, we would predict that how much an given image is rotated, right? And then we would take that learning from the self-supervised model and apply it to downstream layers. This is also known as transfer learning, as I've explained before. So after that, you could see you could also use for classification, and classification plus localization. By localization, we mean that we would also draw a box and detect an object, right? So this is a kind of a rough idea of a object detection pipeline for self-supervised learning. And in the next image, we can see the a more descriptive image, descriptive flow, which the upper image kind of contains only blocks. Now we will expand them. So let's suppose we have a set of images, and now we will get the labels, because we have some unlabeled images. Let's make it precise. And we of course don't want to generate labels manually, and now we will generate labels automatically. So for example, we would use the rotation prediction to generate some representations, and then we will pass through connet to get the representations. And then we would all we you can also do a transfer learning. It's an optional step. Otherwise you could stop at learn representation and apply a softmax for a final prediction of an image. So it will tell you that which one is the maximal activated neuron, and you could map it to the class. So this is how self-supervised learning is applied to object detection. And you can also replace the automation task with any other task, which currently it's only using rotation tasks. You can also use relative fetching, jigsaw puzzles, whichever you think is best for your application. Now I want to highlight some of the state of the art system which is currently used in self-supervised learning. So basically, one of the famous network is SimClear. It stands for Simple Framework for Contrastive Learning Representation. It uses contrastive learning, which I've just explained before. So the idea is to group similar items together, and the items of the other classes must be far apart from one another. So yeah, and it's also one of the most successful self-supervised learning up till now. And the interesting thing is that it's touching the accuracy of the supervised learning methods. So if you could see the graph, you could see that Sinclair accuracy is increasing exponentially. So it has basically three versions. So SimClear 1, 2, and then 3. So the first version had an accuracy of around 70%, the top one accuracy. So there are various kind of accuracy, top 1, top 5, top 10. So the idea is that the predictive class is the first class should be the one which has the label. So for example, when you pass an image through a network, at the end you would get a list of probabilities for each class, right? And by top one we mean that we will only select the top one result, right? And yeah, so and the x-axis contains the number of learnable parameters, and this is also a very important parameters, as if the learnable parameters is are very high, then then the network could take even months or 6 months, years to train. So we also want to keep a check on that, so we would not have to wait an year, for example, to get a result. So this is also very important property. So yeah, you can see that the same clear accuracy is increasing exponentially, which is very encourageable for people working in this field. But one problem is that the learnable parameters is very high, so it takes a lot of time for SimClear to converge. Unlike supervised learning, which converges in relatively shorter time. So nowadays, people are working in order to reduce the number of learnable parameters, and such that it can replace supervised learning in the future. So let's go a bit deep in SimClear. So SimClear idea is very simple. So you take an image, you apply some kind of data augmentation. So you could also rotate the image and scale the images, and there are many kind of rotation, scaling, and many kinds of augmentation properties that you could exploit. And then you pass through encoder. So previously we were using CNNs. Now we are using encoders to get the representation. The encoders would give you a, for example, 128 dimensional vector of an image. And so, and at the end you would see that these two images are from the same class. For example, the second image is also a cat, the first is also a cat. By applying data augmentation, the class does not change, it remains the same. So the idea is basically same as the contrastive learning. So the embeddings of these two should be as close as possible. So that's why at the end we are simply maximizing the similarity. So one question would arise that why we are using any projection head. So the idea behind this is to introduce some non-linearity in the representation learning. So when encoders are usually giving the representations, they are kind of linearly related to each other. So and we don't want that, because linear relations are kind of bad, because it would give you it would give you a higher similarity anyways. So the loss function wouldn't work. So that's why you need to introduce some non-linearity in the network, and at the end of the day you would want to maximize the similarity between them. Also, the downstream task, which could be object detection, segmentations, are applied on representations which are being learned through encoder. So if we apply the downstream task on the encoder's representations, not on the final ones. So this is you could see the flow from here as well. So for example, the dog, you could see that, and then we are randomly applying some augmentations. For example, cropping here. So we will crop the face of the dog, then the legs, and we pass through some kind of encoder to get the representation, and then we are passing through MLP, which is multi-layer perceptron, and this is the projection head basically. So the idea is that the representations from the opposite class should should repel each other, and the representations from the similar class should attract with each other. I mean, by attraction we mean that they should be close enough in the feature space, right? And the representation from the other class should be far enough, because we want to cluster the images in the feature space. You can see that it's a very simple idea, but it produces fascinating results. So yeah, to conclude, I would like to provide some discussion on self-supervised learning. So we have already seen that self-supervised learning for computer vision tasks is already challenging supervised learning. I mean, the accuracy is almost there, but the learnable parameter problem is arising in self-supervised learning, and we need to somehow get rid of them, use some better and efficient structures, and good architectures in order to reduce that, and if we are able to do that, we can then the application area would expand exponentially. We could also use them in low computing power devices. And also, the big difference of self-supervised learning is that it gives you global representation of the data set, which is of course useful in many tasks, as we have already seen, like object detection, segmentation, and so on. So this marks the end of the talk. So thank you very much for listening. And if you have any questions, please feel free to ask.
So yeah, Danish, there is a question in Q&A section. You can
Okay.
access it.
Okay.
I have answered the question, but I just said we will answer the question at the end, so you can read and answer the question.
Okay. So where is the question?
Uh, it's basically in the answered section of Q&A.
Answer section. Okay. Um, okay. Could you forward it to me?
Okay, sure. I just read it the question, so
Okay.
you can
Yeah.
listen
Thank you.
and then
Thank you.
answer. Is there a difference between reinforcement learning and self-supervised learning? What are some of the good resources to understand self-supervised learning?
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, of course, reinforcement learning and self-supervised learning are of course very different, right? As I've already explained in the presentation, is as well reinforcement learning using some kind of have an environment and an agent, and the agent interact with the environment, and it gets some reward based of its action, right? Of course, we don't have any labels in reinforcement learning as well. The agent learns through by his actions, right? Whereas in self-supervised learning, we also use some pretext task and downstream tasks. So in downstream tasks, we have some labels of the pseudo of the task that we are trying to solve. So for example, we would have some object detection labels in self-supervised learning in downstream tasks. So this is a very clear difference between self-supervised learning and reinforcement learning.
Okay,
And
okay,
yeah, let me finish. What are some of the good resources to understand self-supervised learning? So you could, as I've already mentioned, you could start from SimClear. So I can share the link of the paper. You could start from there. The paper is very easy, and I'm sure that anyone having some of the information can learn from it. Yeah.
okay. Thank you. Another question is basically you talked about introducing non-linearity in the linear encoded data. Why is that necessary?
So are you talking about the in SimClear, I suppose?
It, I
Yeah,
don't
so
know.
okay, so I assume that it's in
Okay.
SimClear. So yeah, so authors have proved that the loss functions work better in non-linear representations. So if you use only linear representation, the loss function, which is usually a cosine similarity function. So let me explain cosine similarity a bit. So you have some vector. So for example, you have two vectors and you would like to find what is the angle between them. And for example, and the idea is that and if the vector from points to the same direction, the loss is less, and if the vectors point to the opposite direction, the loss is high. So we want to kind of point the vectors of the class to same direction, so that they we can so that the loss is less between them. Cosine similarity is kind of a loss function which is being used in SimClear. So yeah, that's why it's necessary.
Okay, another question is why self-supervised learning takes much time for training model, even if it uses transfer learning, which should make the training faster.
Yes, this is a very good question. So by that, so for at the first we need to apply some pretext learning as well. So the pretext tasks usually use a lot of learning parameters, and hence it increases the complexity of self-supervised learning as well. So that's why I mentioned that we need good pretext tasks which uses less learnable parameters. However, it also does not compromise on the accuracy as well.
Okay, okay. Thank you so much, Danish. You took a time to deliver this session. It's
No worries.
really an honor for me to host you. And thank you for National Incubation Center for hosting this event as well. And I just really excited to conduct this event. So thanks once again. Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Okay, then.
Okay,
Goodbye.
okay, bye.